Stefan Molyneux is our guest. Really appreciate him joining us and coming on. Stefan, I don't know where to begin here, but this is just a crazy time to be alive.
It is a crazy and great time to be alive, Alex. The fact that they're coming after us, the fact that they're trying to demonetize people who are speaking out on YouTube, because YouTube is largely owned by people who are anti-useless wars, anti-left and so on. Facebook and other places seem to be a little bit more on the left, but we've kind of taken over on YouTube, which is why YouTube is being targeted now so that people aren't able to speak up and speak their minds without fear of being demonetized, which is why they're always trying to target your source of income and discredit you at a personal level rather than actually engage in your arguments. It used to be known very well in civilized society that anyone who refused to engage in your arguments, like someone who refused to hit your ball back in a tennis game, they lost by default. But unfortunately, people have become kind of propagandized, dumbed down, good job government schools. So now these kinds of attack your source of income, attack your character, seem to have some traction, but I think we're going to win nonetheless.
Well, Stefan, when we come back, what do you want to get into first? Obviously, you've been not a big fan of these military strikes, and I see your perspective. I tend to lean your way, but now I'm seeing results out of what Trump did. That's almost scarier because that'll encourage more of this aggressive stance.
I am perfectly willing to put the tomahawks in the rear view. That was a one-time thing. It's a sort of, maybe it's a trial balloon from the deep state or the military-industrial complex. My concern, Alex, is another ground invasion in the Middle East. Its commitment to regime change in the Middle East, which has been tried so many times throughout history and fails every single time. And the reasons are pretty clear. You are dealing with a highly indoctrinated, fairly low IQ population. All the smart people left the Middle East decades ago to escape to the West, to escape to other places. You don't have the hard clay you need to build the foundations of some Jeffersonian democracy in the ruins and indoctrinated mess that is left over from centuries of foreign imperialism and domestic propaganda.
That's right. We have to build a wall around it, and then people that want to convert to the West, no matter what color they are, and who want freedom and prosperity can come here. But if you want to come here and make us go under Sharia and come here and bully everybody and sue everybody that doesn't agree with Islam and pull all your infighting crap, sorry, we don't want to be a Stone Age death cult monotheistic thing where women are slaves. Right, Stefan?
I certainly would not want to live under that kind of law.
Absolutely, and they want to make us live under it, and it just ain't going to happen. We'll be right back with Stefan Molyneux of Free Domain Radio. I'm Alex Jones. Waging war on corruption, crashing through the lies and disinformation. I'm Alex Jones, your host. I want to play a bunch of clips and cover the waterfront in the next long 18-minute segment coming up. This is a short 6-minute segment. Stefan Molyneux of Free Domain Radio is our guest. This is a breaking story confirming what Zero Hedge was linking to in the People's Daily yesterday. We'll cover more of the censorship in the next segment because that's key, folks. I know you know about it, but we're becoming conditioned to accept it. That's when they've got us. We've got to talk about a battle plan on that and more. But first, China warns North Korea amid massive troop buildup on the border. We will react strongly to nuclear threats, China says, and threatens to take nuclear action. Says they're not going to let the U.S. do it, which is exactly what Trump said. He said, listen, you're making most of your money off the U.S. and Japan. Knock it off, man. You have massive trade with South Korea, almost none with the North. Just chill out. Quit using it as some Cold War relic. See, Trump's a realist. So this is a big deal. You got North Korea's nuclear test reaching meltdown. That's supposedly going to happen on the birthday of the sick, hereditary dictator grandfather, Kim Jong-un's grandfather. Stefan Molyneux, could there not be a better poster child of the ridiculousness of state worship than Kim Jong-un, this feckless, craven, demon-smiling, fat chipmunk, horrible little creature that, kills his family with, mortars for entertainment out on a grass lawn, firing mortars at him a half-mile away. I mean, he is literally the archetype of a spoiled demonic brat who was given his own planet, basically. I mean, the stuff of satire doesn't go far enough. And then I see the left in people thinking he's cute and funny and liking Mal bars in Denver. And what the hell? And people, last week in D.C. were spitting on a small memorial for the victims of communism. What is going on here?
Well, people don't like, and the left doesn't like him as an example of the end game of communism, which is rancid, horrifying totalitarian dictatorships where people are regularly shipped off to camps, where if you manage to escape the regime, of course, your family is dragged into these camps, where people live and die underground in mines and die horribly of vitamin D deficiencies and other ailments and so on. It is a monstrous, hideous regime, and it was started, of course, with the support of Stalin at the end of the Second World War, after it had suffered under decades of occupation from Japan. So this is a country that results from significant military and ideological occupation by foreign powers. And so the left doesn't like it because it really shows up just what happens in the long run to central planning, to price controls, to communism and socialism and all of those toxic ideologies. So they have some sympathy for it, because to hate it is, like they hate Russia now, but they loved Russia under Stalin. They loved Russia when it was murderous. Now they hate Russia when it's largely Christian and nationalistic, because it goes against the toxic internationalism of the left.
That's right. And, it's so pitiful. I mean, it's great that you know history. I know a lot of the audience does, but I've studied it because it's so intriguing. I don't study history, so I can be impressive. North Korea has been enslaved for thousands of years. It's never had a free culture. And smart, hardworking people who the Japanese used as slave labor and as coal miners to fuel themselves in World War II. China has used it, had a bunch of wars with them. And then look at the South, just 60 years of quasi-freedom, one of the richest countries in the world, incredible inventions. The people are just worlds apart compared to the North. Just a total example of what a little bit of freedom does. And so we can look at North Koreans and laugh at them worshiping the tyrant, but they were born into this. Most of the population has their children taken at birth and put into communes, so there's not even family. Their mother and father, when they're not given love in their crib or anything, when they are given love, they're told, that the dear leader gives you this love. When they're given food, Venezuela does this. They're told, that the spirit of Hugo Chavez gives you this milk. I mean, it is the religion of the state. And the stupid leftists that think it's cute, sitting here in the wreck of what was freedom, have no idea the gates of hell they've opened.
Well, this is what people need to understand. And for people who are too young to remember, as you and I do, Alex, the difference between East and West Berlin in the divided Germany, because this has happened a bunch of times before. It happened in Vietnam, it happened in Germany, when the East and the West divide up a country, when communism and capitalism divide up a country. South Korea has like twice the population of North Korea, but it has over 40 times the economic output of North Korea, because they're free. And because it has all of this wealth, it seems hard to me to understand why they need 25,000 American troops sitting in there, many decades after the end, or I guess there was never an official end of the Korean War. But this is the difference between socialism and central planning and totalitarianism versus a relatively free market. And I got to tell you, Alex, the ring of power is dangling itself in front of me in a very, very tempting way, because I can think of two successful regime changes in history, brutal though they were. We're talking the liberation of Germany under the Nazis and the liberation of the emperor's grip over the semi-death cult in Japan that occurred, of course, at the end of the Second World War. You had existing infrastructures decapitated. You had new infrastructures come in.
The only time that happened before was the Black Plague wiping out the elites as well. Let's come back and talk about that. Quite frankly, who needs to be wiped out is the elites. I'm not calling for violence, but Trump is a blue-collar elite who actually wants to have productivity. But at least throughout history, want feudalism. Our guest will explain that when we come back. And take Stefan Molyneux, going from reaching millions a week to tens of millions a week. It's good to know he's there with freedomainradio.com. I haven't asked him specifically about his monetization, but let's ask him now. You can follow him on Twitter at Stefan Molyneux. It looks like Molyneux with X. Well, the reason I'm making a big issue out of this is it's the Democrats, it's the UN, it's George Soros, it's in the WikiLeaks. By name, they say, arrest them as Russian spies, shut off InfoWars, shut off Breitbart. We're the main groups they're trying to shut off. The Federal Elections Commission says shut off Drudge. Everyone should be horrified. It's not like I'm up here saying, oh, I'm being censored. Oh, give me more money. We're here with the main globalist force spending half their time on us, demonizing us, articles coming out every minute. I mean, I'm talking every few minutes. Sometimes thousands a day, Stefan. So when I bring this up, we are the issue. I don't want to be gonzo journalism. I want to sit here and talk about myself all day. We're in the center of this. This is happening. It's happening to you, I know, because I know anybody that's a libertarian or a patriot, some would call you a liberal. The globalists call you a right-winger. It's all a load of crap. None of these definitions mean anything. I'm a super classical liberal, pro-freedom, live and let live guy. It's crazy. The liberals are like, they have a religion of being neurotic weirdos, just like super right-wing Christians. And I'm just sick of their cult. I'm sick of Islam. I'm sick of all these groups trying to make me be in their cult. And then we're under attack. What do you think we should do? What have you gone through? How do I get it through the listeners? I know they're supporting, but they have to understand, if they can shut us down, folks, we'll be like China. It's over. They're going after the First Amendment nakedly and have the left celebrating. Yeah, yay. Shut Alex up. Arrest him. I mean, it's crazy, Stefan.
It is, and I hate to be annoying, I told you so, guys, to other people, but many, many years ago, I recognized the dangers of the waters I was treading into, and I made a very, very clear business plan around decentralizing my monetization. So I take donations directly from listeners at freedomainradio.com/donate. And of course, everyone has their part to play. Some of us are the more vocal mouthpieces. Maybe we have the history, we have the charisma, we have the fluid linguistic skills, we can make goofy jokes, and we can get the message across to the audience. Other people can help support in their own ways. They can share videos, they can like videos, they can talk with their friends and family if they want a more private life. They can donate, they can do lots of things, but we all need to work together. Of course, they're going to go after the source of our income because they perceive that we're going after the source of their income, which a lot of times is government spending, military-industrial complex, massive amounts of welfare, refugee settlement money, you name it, affirmative action. They feel that we're going after the source of their income when we start talking about equality before the law, a true free market, letting supply and demand set prices, not having the government regulations choke and claustrophobe everything off that people are trying to do to make a buck. So yeah, they're retaliating in money wars because they can't match us in the intellectual wars, and everyone has their part to play in helping to fight back. What are you saving your money for? If we lose, if there's increasing censorship, if their First Amendment is lost, if there are useless foreign wars, your money's going to end up worthless anyway. You might as well spend it now in the fight for freedom.
That's right. So many people go, oh, things are bad, I'm going to hoard my money more. You lose it to globalists, you lose everything. That's why this year I've said I'm not even intending to take any profit for myself as backup money for my family. I'm going to spend everything in expanding and doing everything I can because exactly, it's claustrophobic. That's what it feels like. You said it. South Korea has 40 times the GDP of the North. They have incredible wealth, some of the best medicine in the world, some of the best universities, the most connected group in the world, versus a place that only has 2 cities that have any light, almost no cars. Don't the people that want affirmative this, affirmative that, understand free market is the engine, never perfect, but it over-delivers 100 to 1 versus collectivism. My God. Don't they understand that?
If you look at American foreign policy, right, and the foreign policy of the West, there were a number of totalitarian dictatorships throughout the 20th century where there was a often fractious but generally non-confrontational coexistence. I mean, there were proxy wars and all of that, but if you look at places like Russia was allowed to fall down on its own, and China was allowed to reform itself to a large degree starting in the 90s on its own. Look at extreme socialism that was handed to India after the Second World War under the Raj by all these British-educated socialists. It was allowed to reform on its own, and now you have 50,000 people a month in India going from poverty to the middle class. So there are ways that countries can reform themselves if they're allowed to sort of continue down that path. But if you go in and start blowing people up, it is going to turn a lot of the population against you. It may, in fact, retard any progress. Now, that having been said, I was talking earlier about the ring of power I'm tempted by, Alex. If I had to choose between intervention in Syria, regime change in Syria versus regime change in North Korea, I would choose North Korea every day of the week and twice on Sundays, because I think of the people groaning in these concentration camps, starving to death, afraid to have children, afraid to open their mouths, these weekly self-condemnation situations, these henpecking parties where you're supposed to nag at yourself and nag at everyone else for you didn't polish the dear president's picture enough. And if you could take out that leadership, this is an amoral geopolitical calculation, so forgive me for stepping in this direction, but that is a decapitation politically that could conceivably work in the same way it worked in Japan, in the same way that it worked in Germany. You have a high IQ population that are desperate for freedom.
You're absolutely on target with that. Let's speak, before we get back into the World War III news and all the important stuff, Stefan Molyneux, about feudalism, because the average person just gets caught up in daily life and doesn't study history, so they don't know. The establishment doesn't want people to know, obviously, or they'd be free, and then they wouldn't need these monopolies anymore. But why do elites throughout history create feudalism? They clearly know that it's a monopoly of power and that that's how they stay in power and never actually have to perform or compete. I mean, that's what we're up against.
Well, of course, look at the elites and how they were developed throughout most of human history. Most of human history was bloody warfare, was repression, was brutality, was violence. And so who floats to the top in a prison? Well, it tends to be the most violent. And so if you look at the aristocracies around the world, a lot of inbreeding, which you talked about before, and we can look at the Syrian situation where there's, between 30% in the cities and 40% cousin marriage going on in the countries, which suppresses IQ significantly. So the elites, not only are they inbred, but also they have floated to the top, usually through their capacity to commit violence, either directly as the king or on behalf of the king. Who were the nobles? Who were the aristocracy? Those who slaughtered usually the most defenseless peasants on behalf of the king in order to repress people and gain tax revenue. So the elites have been bred for ferocity and have been inbred into some pretty challenging intellectual standards or capacities. So that is an ancient inbred murder cult in a way that has fostered the foundation of a lot of elites in society, and it is a pretty demonic group as a whole.
Keep elaborating on that because, I mean, again, that's why history is so fascinating for people that haven't looked into it. It's just replete with this.
Yeah, so you have to be willing to kill for the king, and the more you kill for the king, and the more revenue you generate for the king, and the more peasants you enslave and conquer for the king, the more you're promoted up in at court. So most of human history is a well-decorated, well-costumed, well-bejeweled mafia. And who rises in the mafia? It's not the nice guy, it's not Barney the dinosaur, and it's not the guy who likes to hug trees. It's the guy who can most efficiently kill or threaten for profit. And because these people were incredibly violent in their origins and in their promotion, they dragged with them a lot of sophists who would help recast the murderousness of the elites as patriotism.
That's right. A bunch of sycophantic,
these guys.
A bunch of sycophantic artists and people who would then like worship and make the evil look beautiful, just like we see in North Korea.
Well, yes, and of course, just like we see in a lot of government-funded art, which is making the ugly appear beautiful and attempting to corrupt our love of beauty and therefore our love of truth in order to get us to view evil as good, which is the foundation for allegiance to a lot of political elites.
We should show for TV viewers some North Korean art, but anybody can search engine it and pull it up. Stefan Molyneux is our guest. Let's look at some of these headlines. We have China threatening to bomb North Korea's nuclear facilities. We have Google search for World War III hits highest ever. We have price of gold going up on the concerns. We have China's president calling Trump urges peaceful approach to North Korea. So that's just some of the news we have on that front. More and more, do you think North Korea will back down? Because they're the big wild card. How much control does China really have, Stefan, from your research?
I do not think that North Korea will back down. Power, as we've talked about before, is a very highly addictive drug. And there's very few people, there are a few people, but very few people in history have relinquished power voluntarily because it is so addictive. So there's two things that need to be done, in my opinion, and I don't know which one of the right one is, so I'll leave this to you and your listeners to sort of cogitate on. But isolating the country is not going to do any good. One of the things that laid the foundation to World War II was a 70% drop in international trade that came out because of America's protectionism and the rest of the world's protectionism. So, it's an old saying that when goods stop crossing borders, soldiers will start crossing borders. When countries are united in trade, they tend to be going to war less against each other. North Korea, if it remains completely isolated from the world economy, will have no way ever of integrating into the world economy. When it integrates into the world economy, if that's even possible, there's a flow back and forth of goods. And, the last ruler of North Korea was hugely enamored, as a lot of people are, of Western culture. Didn't like the American government or the Western governments, but loved Western culture. If the North Koreans can get access to trade, to goods, to Western culture, there's a chance that an incipient freedom movement might begin to spontaneously arise within the borders of North Korea. Or,
I was about to say, though, they don't have electricity.
That's another possibility. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you're right, but they don't have electricity. They are totally kept away from Western culture. They believe that the world's still in 1947, basically, and have no idea, again, what planet they're on, kind of like a lot of Afghans. And so they just don't understand. That's what brought down the Soviet Union, was they could see how we were living, or at least how Hollywood claimed we were. They just have no idea. So we have to come back and talk about how do you break through that? Because sure, Kim Jong-un's brother was running off to, Disney World in Tokyo, and Kim Jong-un thinks Dennis Rodman's really cool. They're all obsessed with it. They know how hard. Imagine what it's like for him, though, in his decrepit, horrible, pathetic country. And then he's got hundreds of, or thousands of channels, and he can see how the rest of the world's living. Imagine how pathetic Kim Jong-un feels. Or does he really like walking around like a little demon smiling with little piggy eyes? All right, Stefan's with us a little bit in the next hour. Then Roger Stone, who's hosting the fourth hour, is popping in to give you a preview of what's coming up. And then we've got Millie Weaver and, of course, Owen Schroyer with the Associated Press talking about UN child kidnapping rings, which the media says don't exist, out of one side of their mouth. And I haven't even gotten into Sean Spicer. Not that the story's important, but how they misrepresent on every front. But I also want to mention the North Korea paradigm with Molyneux, because he is, I think, a deep thinker. And I don't say that, as a little verbal flourish as a compliment. It's just true. Imagine being Kim Jong-un. Because I'm a good guy and I work hard and I care about people, and I don't have cultural guilt, I still get guilty that I'm smarter than a lot of people. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, I got problems, or that I do have nice things. Even though I don't worship the nice things, I can tell other people feel bad that I have nicer things than they do. And it's just weird when knowledge is really the greatest value. So is it genetic with these dictators and people? It is a hereditary dictatorship. Soon they'll be wearing crowns in North Korea. That Kim Jong-un just looks completely psychotic, like a cartoon character, like the Joker, smiling maniacally with a bunch of crazy people behind him, with a bunch of rotting 1950s crap around them. And then I see the left running around going, we want socialism, we want communism, we want Maoism. And I'm like, the Chinese rejected Maoism, you idiots. I mean, you want some crazy chipmunk ruling over you and you want to work 18 hours a day? I don't understand. So let me ask this question, and we'll come back in the next short segment and get into Spicer and all this. But Stefan Molyneux of freedomainradio.com. What do you think's going through these dictators' minds? Or are they just so selfish they don't even care when he's watching how fabulously rich just quasi-free market countries are with all our problems compared to what he's done to his people? How does he psychically, I don't understand consciously he doesn't care, but there's got to be some blood level. Or I guess he is super unhealthy and his dad was unhealthy. I guess, do they not know that there's literally a blowback? Not even spiritual, people don't believe in that. They've genetically proven you're doing bad things around you. It's gonna, your body doesn't like it. Your body gives you cancer. Doesn't he know that what he's doing is bad?
Well, I mean, this is the question of the conscience, and the conscience is not evenly distributed across the population. There is a combination of genetic and environmental factors that can help produce people who don't have a conscience. This is really, really important for people to understand. We're not all the same. Don't mistake the world for yourself. So you and I and others, we care about the world. We'll take the personal hits to make the world a better place for our kids, for everyone, for the future. And that's because I feel obligated to all of the great heroes and heroines in the past who helped deliver a relatively free world for me to be able to pass it along, add to it, and move it to the next generation, hopefully enhanced. You know, we don't inherit freedom from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children, and we need to add to it in the same way we need to protect the environment. But there are studies in England that show if you have a genetic predisposition to a certain kind of psychopathy, to a certain amount of conscienceless behavior, if you're exposed to child abuse, particularly beatings, physical violence, and so on, then 100% of the kids who had this genetic tendency, who were exposed to violence, became criminals and so on. So there is this capacity, partly genetic and partly environmental. The development of the conscience and of empathy involves 13 complicated parts of your brain all interacting together, and it's a very challenging thing to try and get it into people after the fact. It's like a language window. You know, I don't remember teaching my daughter all the words that she uses, but she just kind of picks them up and starts using them. If you start trying to teach kids at the age of 10 language, they never really pick it up very organically.
That's right. If you put babies in cribs and they're not up next to you and they don't learn empathy, it is spiritual. I mean, whatever you want to call it, there's this deepness, and a lot of people don't get this deepness. If you get the deepness or the place of the Most High, then you're interconnected to everybody, and people are missing that. We'll be back. And it's not like we're on some high horse, folks. We have all the evil thoughts and all the rest of it. It's just that we have the other thoughts, too. We'll be right back with Stefan Molyneux. Powerful. Now, the fact that they're having to censor hundreds of prominent classical liberals, that's who they're really going after, not right-wingers, not fake left-wingers, but people that really do just want to go, hey, this works the best in society. We want to bring it back. We didn't invent it, but we'd like to go in the direction we were going. You can go towards North Korea, or you can go the direction of the United States and England and places have been going for the last 200 years. We'd like to go in that direction, not the other direction. But the fact that they're having to come out and try to censor us and shut us down and do all this really shows they're losing. Stefan Molyneux of freedomainradio.com is our guest. In a few minutes, we have left before Roger Stone pops in with us. Sean Spicer, obviously it's a stupid non-story because technically he's right. Hitler didn't use offensive chemical weapons on the battlefield until the very end. And there actually was some. It's a little more esoteric and hard to find, but it's in some history books that but he used massive chemicals against populations. I mean, undoubtedly, it started killing retarded children. You name it. You inject a retarded child with a chemical that kills them. That's a chemical weapon. Or you know, they had mobile vans gassing people. So he says, you know, even Hitler didn't use gas. So I love how he's warmongering. That's where he's wrong on this whole thing with Syria. Probably a false flag. But then in his lust to look like he hates Syria, he then jumps on this whole Holocaust thing. Well, Spicer's family wasn't involved in the Holocaust. So why is it like some guilt now with fake Democrat groups calling them the Anne Frank Center to say that he's guilty, Stefan, of this, when technically he was right? I said, what the hell's he thinking? It's like Schwarzenegger saying, I want to kill my opponents with carbon monoxide. I'm like, yeah, your dad was an SS officer. That sounds really dumb. Arnold doesn't get it. So technically he's right. They use me saying, what is he, an idiot? Of course they use chemical weapons. Then saying I'm attacking Spicer. So it's just lie upon lie. I mean, it was like hundreds of newspapers all over the news last night that I was attacking Spicer, totally made up. What do you make of this?
Of course he was not denying the Holocaust. He misspoke, or he spoke in a way that could be misinterpreted. And because he's a Republican, the mainstream media is going to misinterpret what Sean Spicer said in the most negative possible way, and is going to rouse the usual suspects to rail against him and so on. But as most things that are happening under the Trump administration, a lot is being revealed about the mainstream media. My God, Alex, the pornography that these people are addicted to, you know, when there was a hint of a potential ground war in Syria, if there's a hint of sudden military action against a Middle Eastern country that has not directly or even indirectly threatened the United States, they're suddenly all over this war, this military-industrial complex. They're not offended by that potential at all, by another multi-trillion-dollar misadventure.
I've got to interrupt you.
Hundreds of thousands of people, but one guy misspeaks, and now they're outraged.
I've got to interrupt you. If you can do 5 more minutes, I'd like to interview you with Stone. If you can do it, if you got to go, it's okay. But Molyneux, you're amazing. I've got to just say this. I'm during the 1-minute break, 70-second break, thinking I'm going to come back and make the point that these evil warmongers and all these evil bad things they're involved in, and then some guy misspeaks, then they project the Holocaust on him, and then I forget to make the point, and you make it better than I would. And that is awesome, because that's exactly how my brain works, and it seems like other people's don't. Like, who are these monsters that push all these lies, all these wars, all this tyranny? They back radical Islam, they cover it up, they won't show us. I saw your tweet, like, all you need to know is that they didn't show you the dead bodies from Stockholm and the car attack, but they did show the, up close stuff of the babies with the nerve gas. It's so ridiculous when you're simply conscious. It's not that we're even smart. We just are awake.
They don't believe anything that comes out of a Republican's mouth. But if Turkey says, oh, absolutely for sure, it was sarin gas, and we managed to have the ambulances right there as the bombs were dropped, we took it back, we analyzed it completely, that apparently is 100% verified. That apparently is 100%. No skepticism about what could potentially be a false flag attack, as if the WMD and lie in Iraq never, ever happened, as if the Gulf of Tonkin never, ever happened, as if no other culture
There's no history of their complete lying.
Into a useless war.
Exactly. If you got to go, you got to go. Can you do 5 more minutes on the side? Great. Stefan Molyneux. And we're going to have Roger Stone with us, too, at the same time. And he'll hold a little bit longer. All right, coming up in about 52 minutes, Roger Stone's going to be live hosting the 4th hour, former head of the Trump campaign. I got Stefan Molyneux here to co-host with us for another 5 minutes or so. I wanted him to have a chance to ask Roger any questions. He's got to like to bring different guests on together occasionally and have a panel here. They attack our credibility every millisecond. I mean, there's just articles every minute or two coming out with just lies, things we didn't say, you name it. Creating division, it's a major psyop. And we bring that up because what are we doing? We're having an effect. It's intensifying. And the MSM is losing its power. They're not effectively shutting us down. They're losing the intellectual battle, so now they want to shut us down. That's a magic moment, because if they fail in the censorship, they take us to the next level, like Paul Watson says, conservatism, which just really just means neoliberalism, going back to stuff that was actually the cutting edge. is the new punk rock. And, of course, now the head of the Sex Pistols, a month after Watson said that, came out and said, yeah, Watson's right, that's the case. And the left just can't stand it because they're the statist. Kim Jong-un's not cool. That's not liberal. The tyranny they want's not cool. Venezuela's not liberal. It's not cool. Liberal means open, free, keep more what you have. So we've got Roger Stone to give us a preview of what's coming up. But I called Roger on Sunday, and I said, listen, I just talked to my White House source, and he told me that Trump's not going to have a no-fly zone. This was a limited deal because they hadn't got rid of their chemicals. And he said, well, you got a good source. That's what I've got. But he goes, I don't want to be, be basically quoted in all this because I want to keep my connections, there. And I said, I understand. But, here he is. I've talked to him yesterday, and he said, it's fine to tell some of the story now. But here's an example. White House source, Trump pushes back against neocon plan to invade Syria. So the good news is, and I want to go to Stefan first on this, is Trump's now come out on Fox Business and other places. And now you see his surrogates have backed off and aren't saying they want water war in Syria, even though they're now on the news saying they want war crimes charges. So it really, really shows that Trump is battling a bunch of people in his own cabinet that do whatever they want. I mean, I'm not trying to give the president a pass here on some of this. It just shows that not even 1% of the federal agencies are doing what he says. They're just doing whatever they want, Stefan.
They are testing whether or not the population is going to go to war or whether the population is going to resist a war. I'm not saying any particular individual. It's like A/B testing, right? Like you put out 2 trailers, you see which one is more popular, and then that's the one you use for the wider audience. You test a product before you try and sell it. And so I think that various elements within the government were floating up the idea of invasion, regime change, boots on the ground, and others were saying, well, a political solution or maybe something else or whatever. And they were working to see what kind of reaction they were going to get, not just from the general public, but from the supporting base of people who were on social media who helped Donald Trump get elected. And I think the pushback against the war narrative is one of the reasons why the pendulum tipped more to the side of a peaceful solution, and everybody should be proud who participated in that particular process.
By the way, I agree, but McMaster's admittedly said regime change for ISIS and Assad, and as Roger Stone said on Wednesday and Thursday, limited strike, but if you go into a big war, you're done. Roger Stone, can you comment on that? And then I want to get into the other news you have, but I want to get one question in from Stefan Molyneux to you.
Well, first of all, I salute my friend Stefan. We had a very vigorous discussion last week on his podcast about this very topic. I would make the point, just slightly different interpretation of Stefan, is that the neocons, the globalists, the establishment types around the president, whether they are White House staff from the Republican National Establishment or whether they are Democrats or others, Bushites brought in by Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, I think they have pushed the president in the direction of war. They would like him to be more mainstream, more neocon. They think that the praise of your actions by John McCain and Hillary and Obama, they think that's a good thing. Sadly, I think the president hasn't had a countervailing influence on him. I don't think that there are a circle of advisors reminding him that the bedrock principle of Trumpism is non-interventionism, that he promised us no more foreign wars for regime change when our interests, the United States, or the interests of the locals are not.
Sure, but Roger, word for word, what we got from our White House source Sunday, and my other source as well, and I called you about it, you were kind of, well, that sounds accurate, but I'm not going to make any statements, is now in the news where he's saying, I don't want war, I don't want no-fly zones. So that's very encouraging. Or do you think Stefan's right? I'm not saying he's right or wrong, that it's like beta testing.
No, I think Stefan is half right. He's being pushed in the direction of war, despite the fact that there's no countervailing counsel from advisors to the contrary. His instincts are right on. He reads social media. He follows cable television. He follows InfoWars. And therefore, the reaction of the rank and file Trump supporter has registered. He knows who he is. He knows what he stands for. So it is Trump making the decisions to turn away from the interventionist path. His advisors, Mattis, McMaster, they have failed to capture the king and transform him into being our next neocon
Sure.
president.
Roger, I want you to be able to tell us what's up next in the fourth hour when you host and some of the big news. I know you're going to be breaking today, but I wanted to get, since I held Stefan over, he always has great questions. Stefan, throw one question in there at Roger, and then thanks for joining us.
Well, I think what the American, I mean, comment then a question. I think the American people is seeing that Trump is having a challenging time enacting some of the central platforms of his domestic agenda. The Constitution clearly gives the president the right to control immigration, but he's being blocked from doing that repeatedly by liberal Obama-appointed judges. He wished to repeal and replace Obamacare. That is hitting challenges. He's done some great work, but he's having challenges getting his domestic agenda done. What people are seeing is that what they want, what they really want from Trump is hard for him to do domestically. But man, if he wants to go lob some bombs, by which he's supposed to go through Congress, the entire system is a slippery slope that allows him to do that. I think people are getting a sense of how big the fight is ahead of us and how much we're going to need to concentrate to support Trump.
And it shows how reckless the elites are. It shows how reckless the elites are. A final question for Roger?
Yeah, so Roger, do you think that people are beginning to wake up to some of the challenges and the deep state fighting back and what a monolith it is that needs to be opposed?
I think they are. Today's news that Carter Page, a low-level issue advisor to Donald Trump, who admits today he's never met Donald Trump or even shaken his hand, and who had no authority in his campaign, was subject to government surveillance through a FISA warrant. I believe that there's a great deal of evidence that indicates that I was also surveilled under that very same warrant or a duplicate of it, and I think Paul Manafort was as well. Their rationale for this, Stefan, was the Russian collusion, which clearly doesn't exist and for which there is no evidence, meaning their real motive was politics. They were using the investigative surveillance capability of our intelligence services to spy on Trump and his advisors for purely political reasons.
And that's totally illegal.
Watergate times 10. If Ehrlichman and Haldeman and others can go to jail, well, then Rice and Jarrett and perhaps even those above them can go to jail.
Well, this was using the official state to illegally spy on a mass scale. Look, they admitted a month ago in Congress, in the House Armed Services Committee, that Alex Jones, InfoWars, and Breitbart are under investigation for actually being under Russian control. Outrageous, folks. Outrageous. That's like saying I'm under Martian control. Now, why'd they do that? Because they got us under surveillance, and they want to be able to tell the president, don't talk to Alex Jones, don't talk to Roger Stone, because they're under investigation as Russian spies. That's how they, don't talk to Nunes, he's under investigation now. Oh, and Rand Paul, he's under investigation. They're saying get rid of the entire election and get rid of all the Republicans that got elected because the Russians ran it all, Roger. It's now reached that level in Atlantic Monthly and in The Economist magazine.
Well, and there's one person who for sure knows that that's false. That would be Donald J. Trump, the president of the United States. And I think that strategy has failed. I trust his instincts. I understand that when Donald Trump has all the information, he will invariably make the right decision.
All right, I've kind of run over here. I know you got to go in 2 minutes. You're up in 40 minutes live. Stefan Molyneux, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today. Just always thought-provoking. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We got 2 minutes to break, Roger. Sorry for interrupting. Tell us what's coming up in the next hour.
Well, I think we're going to focus, Alex, on the Trump economy, something he's not getting credit for. We're going to talk about the machinations of Google to strangle alternative media, which is, surged in this most recent election. We're going to talk about Stephen K. Bannon and why the president seemed to throw him over the side in an interview in which the president actually said, I barely know the guy. So that will be a focus. A lot of good inside stuff, and we'll be making some news in the next hour.
I don't know if you can say this on air, but what's that rule about Trump? You know, first he starts saying, hey, what do you think of this guy? And then, hey, I hear people are saying bad things about this guy. And the next, I don't know this guy. That's when you're gone.
Yeah, that appears to be the 3 steps here. Look, I like Steve Bannon, and we probably have a closer worldview than some of the others on the White House staff. But in many ways, I think he has fostered his own problems here. And we'll analyze it in the next hour.
Well, sure. And like the famous thing, the media keeps saying he's Trump's brain. I mean, I know Trump knows that's bull, but it just becomes a distraction from the fact it is Trump calling the shots, undoubtedly. That's why they always call me or you Trump's brain, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a very key point. I think that there are those in the mainstream media who have picked up on the fact that the president hates it when he believes others are taking credit for his accomplishments. If you read my book, The Making the President 2016, I make it very clear that Trump is his own strategist, that there is no Karl Rove in Trump world.
And by the way, that's not hype. Trump really is the guy. I mean, look how, yeah, absolutely. All right, that's up on Drudge saying he's not my brain.
I'm not sure which is worse, though, Alex. That's that shirt that he's wearing or the headline. I'm not sure which is
Roger Stone coming up in 40 minutes. I'll be back with your phone calls and more.